How do you hold back tears when the very child you carried in your arms, the one you sacrificed everything for, suddenly looks you in the eyes and calls you nothing but a burden? My name is Evelyn. I am 68 years old, a retired nurse who spent 4 decades caring for others. I thought I had raised my son Adam to be strong, compassionate, and grateful. But one night, in a burst of anger, he shouted words that pierced deeper than any wound my body has ever endured. "You're nothing but a burden." Those words echoed in my heart long after he stormed out of my little Portland home. They left me sitting alone with the silence pressing in, wondering if all my years of sacrifice had been forgotten, if my worth had faded away with the strength of my youth. But what Adam didn't know is that fate was preparing to test us in ways neither of us could have imagined. Before I take you deeper into my story, allow me to pause for you, dear listener. I know many of you watching are in your 60s, 70s, or 80s. Some of you wake each morning with aching knees, stiff backs, or hands that don't grip the way they used to. Some of you carry loneliness like an old coat, silent, heavy, and hard to take off. And others carry unspoken worries about children and grandchildren who no longer visit as often as they once did. From my heart to yours, I lift a prayer. May your body find strength, your mind find calm, and your home be filled with warmth rather than silence. May the years ahead not weigh you down but remind you that your wisdom, your memories, and your sacrifices are treasures that this world desperately needs. And if you are listening right now, I invite you, subscribe to this channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. It helps us feel like one big family, gathered from every corner of the world, united by stories that remind us we still matter. My story begins on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in Portland, Oregon. The sun tried to warm the chill that lived in my bones, but the warmth never quite reached me. My little house felt far too big these days. 5 years had passed since I lost my husband, Robert, and the silence he left behind was a constant companion. I filled the emptiness with small routines, knitting half-finished scarves, tidying corners that were already spotless, letting the hum of the evening news keep me company. Old habits die hard, especially for someone who spent 40 years as a nurse, always caring for others. But now, I was no longer caring for patients or family. I was caring only for time, long, heavy hours that stretched out before me. At 68, every morning greeted me with aching knees and the reminder that my body no longer obeyed as it once did. Yet, the greatest pain wasn't in my joints. It was in the loneliness of knowing that the boy I raised, the man I called my pride, had grown distant, until the night his anger cut me to the core. That evening, when Adam raised his voice and hurled those bitter words at me, I felt something inside me break. I had weathered the loss of my husband, the wear of age, and the loneliness of nights spent in silence, but nothing compared to being rejected by the very child I had poured my life into. I thought the wound would linger forever. I thought those words, "You're nothing but a burden," would define the rest of my days. Yet I was wrong, because only a few days later, that same son who dismissed me, who left me trembling in my own home, came back to me with desperation in his eyes. This time he wasn't angry. This time he was begging. Not for money, not for forgiveness, but for something far greater, something that would demand every ounce of love and courage left in me. And as you follow this journey, you will see how quickly life can turn, how the weakest among us can become the strongest, and how a mother's love, even when bruised, never runs dry. The Tuesday sun slipped through my curtains with a light that felt half-hearted, as though even the sky was weary. I pulled myself from bed, joints stiff, each step measured. I had been a nurse for 4 decades, yet age had become my most stubborn patient, one that refused every remedy. The kettle whistled, and I poured hot water over a tea bag, holding the cup between my palms for warmth that went deeper than the liquid inside. My mornings had become ritual. Tea, sorting my medication, and walking through a house that no longer echoed with conversation. Robert had been gone 5 years now, and though I had learned to live with his absence, there were days I felt it gnawed at me more fiercely than the first night alone. A nurse without someone to tend felt like a soldier without a cause. I busied myself with cleaning, rearranging, and knitting, though none of it erased the quiet. It was during one of those restless mornings that the toilet in my master bathroom decided to stop working. I pulled the handle again and again, but it refused to respond. A small inconvenience to some, but in that moment, it felt like one more reminder that the world was slowly shifting out of my control. I leaned against the sink, letting out a long sigh. Once, Robert would have handled it. Once, my own hands would not have trembled at the thought of lifting a tank lid. Now, even simple problems felt heavier. I told myself I could wait for a plumber, but when I called, the voice on the other end explained it would take more than a week before anyone could come. I looked at my reflection in the darkened phone screen, gray hair tied back in a bun, wrinkles framing tired eyes. My heart wrestled with the thought of calling Adam. He was my only child, the center of my world since he was small enough to rest on my shoulder. I had raised him with both pride and worry, especially after Robert's passing. Adam had grown into a man admired by colleagues, a senior software engineer in a bustling firm. He had a wife, Olivia, and 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl who were my light during holidays. Yet lately, even those joys felt distant. His calls came less often, and when they did, they were clipped, strained, as though time itself was chasing him away from me. Still, there was no avoiding it. With reluctance that tasted of shame, I pressed his name on my phone. The line clicked, and his voice came through, quick and distracted. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" The background was filled with the clatter of a keyboard. "Hello, sweetheart," I said gently, keeping my voice calm. "I was wondering if you might be able to come by sometime this week. The toilet in my bathroom isn't working again. I tried calling a plumber, but they won't be able to come for several days, and I thought, well, perhaps it might be an easy fix for you." For a moment, there was only the sound of him typing, then silence. Finally, a deep exhale. "Mom, really? The toilet? I'm buried right now. We have a huge deadline at work. I barely sleep as it is. Can't you just use the other bathroom for a few days?" The sharpness in his tone stung. I lowered my eyes, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. "Of course, darling. I didn't mean to trouble you. I can wait for the plumber. Don't worry about it." His voice softened, but only slightly. "I'm sorry, I have so much on my plate right now. Maybe I can swing by on my way home one evening, but I can't promise." "I understand," I whispered, trying to steady the tremor in my voice. "I love you, Adam." "Love you too, Mom," he replied quickly, and the call ended. I set the phone down on the table, my hand shaking. It wasn't the toilet that left me unsettled. It was the distance I felt in his words. Adam had once been my strongest supporter, my reason to smile through the hardest shifts at the hospital. Now he spoke like a man carrying a weight I could not name, and I was suddenly part of that weight. That night, I prepared a simple dinner for one and sat at the kitchen table. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, my fork tapping softly against the plate. Loneliness is strange. It can sit across from you like a dinner guest, staring while you pretend not to notice. I cleared the table, turned on the news for company, and went to bed earlier than usual. But rest did not come easily. My mind kept returning to Adam's hurried voice, the fatigue I had heard but dared not mention. I pulled the blanket higher, telling myself tomorrow would feel lighter. Yet tomorrow would bring more than I expected. The following evening, I tried to settle myself into the quiet of my home. Dinner had been nothing more than a bowl of soup and half a slice of bread, eaten slowly at the kitchen table. I turned on the television not to watch, but to drown out the silence that pressed against me. Just as sleep began to tug at my eyes, the sound of tires crunching on the driveway jolted me upright. My heart leapt. "Adam." I hurried to the front door, pulling my robe tightly around me. When I opened it, there he was, standing in the dim light of the porch. His once neat hair was unkempt, his eyes bloodshot, and his suit wrinkled as though it had carried the weight of too many restless nights. He didn't greet me. He simply brushed past, carrying a small toolbox. "I came as soon as I could get away," he said flatly, heading straight toward the bathroom. I followed quietly, watching as he bent over the toilet tank with jerky movements. His hands, usually so steady, trembled as he adjusted the parts. The only sounds were the clink of tools and his sharp breaths. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" I asked softly, afraid of shattering the fragile air between us. He let out a bitter laugh, one that startled me. "All right?" You have no idea, Mom. No idea what it's like to be me right now. He slammed the lid of the tank down. The toilet flushed successfully, yet instead of relief, there was only tension in his posture. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned to face me, eyes hollow and jaw tight. Do you know what it's like to have everyone rely on you? To fix everything. Broken toilets, broken deadlines, broken lives? I can't keep carrying all of this. I tried to reach for him, but he stepped closer, his voice rising with every word. Every time the phone rings, it's you. Another appointment, another chore, another problem. I love you, but you don't understand how much of a drain this is. I can't do it anymore. My knees went weak. Tears filled my eyes, and before I could gather my words, his next sentence tore through me like glass. You're nothing but a burden. The house fell into a silence so sharp it seemed even the walls recoiled. Adam stared at me, his face pale now, regret flickering behind the fury. But he said nothing. He turned abruptly, gathered his tools, and stormed out. The slam of the car door and the screech of tires were the only farewell he left me. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to breathe, unable to think. The boy I had cradled, the man I had sacrificed for, had thrown away my worth in a single sentence. I sank onto the sofa, clutching my chest as if the words themselves had left a wound there. Hours passed before I moved again, the shadows lengthening across the room. When I finally did, it was only to gather the tools he had left scattered on the floor. My fingers trembled as I reached for the open toolbox. A folded piece of paper slipped out, fluttering onto the tiles. I bent slowly, knees protesting, and picked it up. The letters and numbers printed on the page froze me in place. Final notice of foreclosure. The address wasn't mine, it was Adam's. I unfolded the notice again and again, as if staring at the words long enough would change them. Foreclosure. My son's house, his pride, his dream, was about to be taken. My chest tightened, and the room seemed smaller, the air thinner. I thought of the evenings he had spoken of his new subdivision with excitement, of how he wanted his children to grow up with a yard big enough for games of catch. He had worked years to save for that down payment. How could all of it be slipping through his hands so soon? I sat on the edge of my bed that night, the paper trembling in my grasp. Sleep would not come. My heart raced with a storm of questions. Why hadn't he told me? Why lash out at me instead of admitting the truth? Had he made some reckless choice? Or was this the reason his eyes carried such exhaustion? I called him once, twice, leaving messages that went unanswered. I tried Olivia's number, but it went straight to voicemail. The silence was louder than any words he could have spoken. By dawn, I was still awake. The foreclosure notice lay on the nightstand, an unwanted companion. I knew I couldn't just sit and wait. Something was deeply wrong, and no matter how sharp his words had been, Adam was still my child. My knees ached as I dressed in my old floral dress. I drove toward the address on the notice, the city streets blurring past as if they too wanted to avoid my gaze. When I reached the neighborhood, I slowed. The subdivision was filled with freshly built homes, lawns clipped to perfection, driveways lined with identical cars. But Adam's house looked nothing like the pictures he had once proudly shown me. The grass had grown long and uneven. Flyers stuffed the mailbox, and a crooked for sale sign leaned tiredly in the front yard. I sat in my car for several minutes, staring. This was not the home of a thriving family. This was abandonment. A woman a few doors down stood trimming her rose bushes, her silver hair glinting in the sunlight. Gathering what little courage I had, I stepped out of my car and walked slowly toward her. "Excuse me," I said, voice hesitant. "I'm Adam's mother. He and his wife used to live here. Do you happen to know what happened?" The woman, who introduced herself as Barbara, lowered her shears. Her eyes softened with recognition. "Oh yes. I'm so sorry. They left suddenly, just a few days ago. One day they were here, the next gone. The sign went up right after." My stomach nodded. "Did they say anything? Did you see anything unusual?" Barbara glanced toward the house, then back at me. "There were fights. Loud ones. For weeks, really. My husband and I thought it was just stress, but a few nights ago, it was worse. Olivia was shouting. I heard her say, "You gambled our future away. You gambled our son's future." Then Adam shouted back, but I couldn't make out the words. It was awful. My heart dropped. Gambling? Adam? The thought was so foreign, so impossible, I nearly stumbled. But Barbara wasn't finished. The next day, men in dark suits came knocking. They didn't look like police, more like collectors. It was frightening. Adam left once, pale as a ghost. He could barely walk to his car. The morning after, the whole family was gone. Her words burned into me. Collectors. Gambling. Debt. This was not the son I knew. Yet the pieces fit together too neatly to ignore. I thanked Barbara, my voice faint, and returned to my car. My hands gripped the steering wheel as if it were the only solid thing left in my world. The son who once called me his anchor was now a stranger drowning in secrets. I drove home in silence, Barbara's words rattling inside my mind like loose stones in a jar. Gambling. Collectors. My son? It was a truth I refused to accept, yet the evidence pressed against me from all sides. Back in my living room, I laid the foreclosure notice on the table and stared at it until the letters blurred. Something inside me whispered that there was more. Adam wasn't reckless, not like this. There had to be another reason. I remembered that years ago, after my hip surgery, I had signed over power of attorney to Adam, just in case something happened to me. It had given him access to my accounts, a safety measure I thought I could trust without hesitation. My stomach tightened as the thought grew heavier. I fetched my laptop and logged into my bank account. The familiar numbers that had once given me comfort were gone. My savings account, the money Robert and I had built over a lifetime of work, had been drained. Transaction after transaction appeared, each one larger than the last, stretching back more than a year. The final withdrawal, only days ago, had emptied everything. I sat frozen, a cold wave washing through me. Betrayal cut sharper than Adam's cruel words ever had. He had not only wounded me with his anger, he had stolen from me. The tears came hot, but I wiped them quickly, forcing myself to focus. Scrolling through the records, one detail caught my eye. The last transaction carried a memo, MDL P72-887. At first, it meant nothing. I tried searching it online, but the results led only to meaningless product codes. I nearly closed the laptop, but something in me refused to let go. I turned to my old nursing book stacked on a dusty shelf. Perhaps it was a medical reference, a patient code. I flipped through pages, but no match appeared. Frustrated yet determined, I turned to an old online nursing forum, a place where retired colleagues still exchanged information. I typed the code into the search bar and waited. The reply came within minutes. A former colleague recognized it immediately. It's not a product code, it's a patient case code from a private clinic. The Serafina Clinic in Hillsborough. They treat rare childhood illnesses with experimental procedures. The words knocked the air from my lungs. My thoughts flew to Barbara's memory of Olivia's screams. You gambled our son's future away. Could this be about Lucas? My sweet grandson, pale and quiet at Thanksgiving, dismissed by Adam as having a cold. My heart pounded so loudly I pressed a hand against my chest. It wasn't gambling. It wasn't recklessness. It was something far more desperate. I slammed the laptop shut, my mind racing. I had to see it for myself. My hands shook as I grabbed my purse and keys. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about family, about a little boy who might be fighting for his life while his parents drowned in secrecy. As I stepped outside, the morning air hit me with a chill that carried more weight than the cold of age. My knees ached as I slid into the driver's seat of my old sedan. I started the engine with trembling fingers, determination overtaking the fear. I had been called a burden. I had been stripped of my savings. But if my grandson needed me, none of that mattered. I would uncover the truth, no matter how painful it was. The road stretched ahead, carrying me toward the Serafina Clinic, and toward answers that would change everything I thought I knew about my son. The Serafina Clinic stood at the edge of an office park, its glass facade reflecting the gray Oregon sky. It looked nothing like a hospital, but the stillness around it carried the same weight of unspoken suffering. I pushed open the heavy doors and entered a lobby too clean, too quiet. The smell of antiseptic mingled with a faint floral fragrance, an attempt to soften what could not be softened. I approached the front desk, where a young receptionist offered a polite smile. "May I help you?" "My grandson," I said, my voice quivering. "Lucas Smith. I know he's here." "I'm his grandmother." Her smile faltered. "Family visits are usually limited to parents or caretakers." "I am family," I insisted, pressing a hand to my chest. "Please." After a hesitant pause, she murmured into her headset. A few minutes later, a tall man in a lab coat appeared. His weary expression told me everything before he even spoke. "Mrs. Smith," he asked gently. "I'm Dr. Carter. Please come with me." He led me into a small consultation room. My heart pounded against my ribs as I clutched my purse like a shield. "Lucas has a rare autoimmune condition," Dr. Carter explained. "His body is attacking its own bone marrow. We've tried chemotherapy and radiation with no success. The treatment here is experimental and costly. Your son and his wife have done everything to give him a chance, but the burden has been overwhelming." I pressed trembling fingers against my lips. Why didn't they tell me? Why hide this from me? Before the doctor could answer, the door opened. Adam stepped inside, Olivia trailing behind him. They looked broken, faces pale, eyes swollen from crying. Adam froze when he saw me. "Mom, you shouldn't be here." I rose from my chair, holding out the foreclosure notice I had carried in my purse. My voice cracked, but anger gave it strength. "You lied to me. You took everything, my savings, my trust, and left me with nothing but silence. Why, Adam? Why?" He lowered his head, shame etched into every line of his face. "I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to see how far I'd fallen. I thought I could handle it on my own, but I had nothing left." His words trailed into a whisper. "I wasn't gambling, Mom. I was trying to save my son." Olivia stepped forward, her shoulders shaking. "I begged him to tell you, but he said it was his responsibility. He didn't want you to carry the fear we were carrying." Tears blurred my vision. I looked from one to the other, torn between heartbreak and a love too deep to sever. "And so you called me a burden," I whispered. Adam's voice broke. I was angry at myself. I felt like a failure as a father, as a husband, and as your son. Every time you asked for help, it reminded me of how little I had left to give. "I didn't mean it, Mom. I didn't mean it." The words shook the walls inside me. I wanted to cling to my anger, but seeing my son reduced to this hollow figure, his pride crushed under the weight of desperation, left no room for it. I reached out, my hand trembling as I touched his arm. "You may have taken everything, Adam, but you are still my son, and Lucas is my grandson. Whatever is left of me, I will give." The doctor's voice returned, steady but heavy. "There may still be a chance, but it will require more than money. We'll need something only you, Mrs. Smith, can provide." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" Dr. Carter hesitated before answering, but his eyes told me the truth before his words did. "We need a bone marrow donor. And from the tests we've run, you are the best match." The room was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above. Adam's words still hung in the air, his confession pulling me in two directions at once. He had stolen from me, drained every dollar of the life I had built with Robert. Yet here he stood, a broken man, begging not for money but for mercy. My legs weakened, and I sank back into the chair, staring at my trembling hands. "You took everything," I whispered. "Everything I worked for. My safety, my future, all gone." Adam knelt before me, his voice raw. I know, and I hate myself for it. But what choice did I have? Lucas is dying. The insurance wouldn't cover the treatment. I tried loans, second mortgages, even sold the car. Nothing was enough. I was out of options. I thought I could shield you, Mom. Instead, I hurt you." Olivia sobbed quietly in the corner, her face hidden in her hands. The weight of her grief filled the room, pressing against my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him, to demand why he hadn't trusted me from the start. Yet another voice inside me, a voice older, steadier, whispered that anger wouldn't heal what was broken. My grandson needed me. Dr. Carter leaned forward. Mrs. Smith, I know this is overwhelming. But the truth is, Lucas's only chance now is a bone marrow transplant. We tested his parents. Neither is compatible. But you are. The words stunned me. My eyes darted to Adam, who could barely lift his gaze. You knew? I asked, voice trembling. He nodded weakly. They told us last week. I didn't know how to ask you after everything I'd already taken. I thought if I begged for more, you'd never forgive me. A silence followed, heavy and suffocating. My thoughts spun. Memories of Lucas's quiet smile at Thanksgiving, his small hands clutching a toy car, his laugh that reminded me of Robert when he was young. I remembered how pale he had looked, how tired, and how Adam had brushed it off with a lie. I closed my eyes and prayed silently. Lord, I am tired. My body aches. My spirit is heavy. But if this is the reason you have kept me here, then give me strength. Let me not falter now. When I opened my eyes, tears blurred my vision, but my voice came firm. I'll do it. Whatever it takes. If it will save him, I'll do it. Adam's face crumpled. He buried his face in my lap like a child, his shoulders shaking with sobs. I don't deserve you, he whispered. I stroked his hair, my own tears spilling freely. You don't have to deserve me, I said. I am your mother. That will never change. The days that followed moved in a blur. Papers were signed, tests were run, and nurses explained every step of the transplant process. Words like harvest and donor match rolled past me in sterile tones, yet each syllable carried the weight of life itself. I listened carefully, though my mind often drifted to Lucas's fragile smile and the thought that my marrow, my very blood, might be what kept it alive. At night, fear crept in like an unwelcome visitor. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if my body could endure what lay ahead. I was 68, with aching knees and a heart that skipped a beat now and then. What if I wasn't strong enough? What if I left Adam not only a sick child but also a dead mother? But in those dark hours, I would close my eyes and remember the many nights I had walked hospital corridors as a nurse. I had held the hands of patients terrified of their own fragility. I had whispered courage into their ears when they had none left. Now I had to whisper it to myself. The morning of the first procedure, Olivia sat beside me, her eyes swollen from sleeplessness. She clutched my hand as if letting go would mean losing the last thread of hope. You don't have to do this, she whispered, though her voice betrayed how desperately she wanted me to. Yes, I do, I answered, squeezing her hand back. Lucas is my grandson. My family. If my body still has something to give, then it belongs to him. When Adam entered the room, he looked smaller somehow, stripped of all the pride and strength he once carried. He sank into the chair across from me, his voice trembling. I don't know how to thank you. I don't know how to make this right. I looked at him firmly, though my own heart wavered. You don't make it right with words, Adam. You make it right by learning from this. You can rebuild money. You can rebuild trust. But your son only gets one life. That is what matters. He lowered his head, tears dripping onto his hands. For the first time in months, maybe years, I saw not the man buried in stress and pride, but the little boy who once ran to me after scraping his knee, desperate for comfort. The doctors wheeled me into the sterile preparation area. Machines beeped softly. Nurses checked lines and needles. As they attached monitors to my chest, I whispered another prayer. Lord, I am afraid. But if this is what love demands, let me be steady. Let me walk through this fire with dignity. The doctor leaned over me with a kind smile. You're brave, Mrs. Smith. This isn't easy, but your grandson has a real chance because of you. Brave. I wasn't sure if I believed it. My hands shook, my body ached, but beneath the weakness was something sturdier than flesh, love. Love for my grandson, who had barely begun his journey. Love for my son, who had lost his way but was now finding it again through his tears. Love for Robert, whose memory urged me to keep caring, to keep fighting. As they began the procedure, I closed my eyes and let the thoughts settle deep within me. For years, I had feared becoming useless, a burden to my son. But here, in this cold hospital room, I realized something powerful. I was not a burden. I was the very thing standing between life and death for a child I loved more than anything. And for the first time in a long while, I felt purpose flowing through me again. The day of the transplant arrived like a storm cloud, heavy, inescapable, and charged with both dread and hope. Nurses wheeled me into a sterile room lined with monitors and trays of gleaming instruments. The hum of machines filled the air, steady and unfeeling. My body trembled, but my mind whispered the same words over and over. This is for Lucas. This is for my grandson. Adam stood by my side, his hand wrapped around mine. His eyes were bloodshot, not from anger this time, but from endless nights of guilt and worry. "Mom," he said softly, his voice breaking. "If anything happens to you." I squeezed his hand before he could finish. "No more apologies, Adam. Today we don't look backward. Today, we fight for Lucas." The doctors explained the procedure again. Needles, anesthesia, marrow extraction. It all sounded clinical, detached. Yet when they placed the oxygen mask over my face, fear threatened to consume me. I whispered one last prayer. "Lord, if this is my last day, let it be one that saves him." Darkness swallowed me for a while. When I awoke, the world was blurry, my body aching as though I had been hollowed out. Pain radiated through my bones, a deep, relentless ache that no words could soften. A nurse's voice floated above me, calm but firm. "You did well, Mrs. Smith. The marrow has been collected. Lucas has already begun his infusion." Tears slipped down my cheeks. Somewhere, in another room, my grandson's fragile body was receiving the lifeline I had given. My sacrifice was no longer theoretical. It was coursing through his veins at that very moment. Hours later, Adam and Olivia entered, their faces etched with exhaustion but softened by gratitude. Olivia knelt beside my bed, clutching my hand with surprising strength. "You saved him," she whispered. "No matter what happens, you gave him a chance." Adam could barely meet my eyes. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Mom, I called you a burden because I thought I had nothing left to give. But today, I see the truth. You are the strongest person I've ever known." I wanted to answer, but my throat tightened with both pain and emotion. Instead, I managed a faint smile. In that moment, the bitterness of betrayal began to melt. For years, I had feared being forgotten, discarded, or reduced to a nuisance. But here, in my weakness, I was more necessary than ever. That night, as machines beeped rhythmically around me, I whispered another blessing, not for myself, but for every soul watching this story unfold. May your sacrifices never go unseen. May your pain become the seed of healing for those you love. And may your family, even if fractured, find its way back to you in the hour of greatest need. The days after the procedure blurred into one another. Pain lingered in my bones like an unwelcome tenant, reminding me with every movement that giving life takes its toll. I struggled to sit up without wincing, and even the simple act of breathing felt heavy at times. Yet each time I closed my eyes, I pictured Lucas, small, pale, hooked to tubes, and I reminded myself that this suffering was not meaningless. Adam rarely left my side. He fetched water, adjusted my blankets, and read aloud from old magazines he found in the waiting room. His guilt was written in every gesture, as though each act of care was a silent apology. I saw in his eyes the boy he once was, the boy who used to run to me after school clutching drawings, desperate for my approval. One evening, as the hallway lights dimmed, he sat beside me with his head in his hands. "Mom," he said hoarsely, "I don't know how to live with what I've done to you. I took your savings, your trust. I even stole your peace of mind. And now you've given me back more than I could ever repay." I reached out, though my arm trembled. My fingers brushed his hair, the way I had when he was little. "You can repay me by being the father Lucas needs. By loving Olivia. By remembering that family is not measured in dollars or debts, but in how we stand for one another when the world falls apart." His tears dripped onto my hospital gown. "I promise, Mom. I promise I'll never forget this." Meanwhile, Olivia cared for me with a quiet devotion I hadn't expected. She held my hand during long nights, whispered gratitude through her tears, and spoke of Lucas with the kind of hope only a mother can carry. We became closer in those days, no longer in-laws bound by formality, but two women sharing the same fight. Yet despite the closeness, fear lingered. Lucas's recovery was uncertain. The doctors warned us that his body might reject the transplant, that infection could strike at any moment. Every beep of his monitor felt like a verdict. I was too weak to walk, but Adam pushed my wheelchair to Lucas's room. Seeing him there, so small beneath the blankets, his chest rising and falling with effort, broke me in ways I hadn't thought possible. A nurse adjusted his foreline, and I whispered softly, "Lucas, Grandma is here. I gave you part of me, and I'm not going anywhere until you're strong enough to smile again." Though he didn't stir, I imagined he could hear me. I imagined my marrow carrying not only life, but love, flowing through him, urging him to fight. That night, back in my own room, I prayed again, this time not just for myself, but for everyone listening now. If you have carried the weight of sickness, if you have sat at the bedside of someone you love with nothing but prayer in your hands, may you find strength. May you see healing where there was despair, and may hope never leave your house. Recovery tested me in ways I hadn't imagined. Each morning brought a new wave of aches that settled deep into my bones. Standing felt like carrying bricks inside my body, and even lifting a glass of water required effort. Nurses reminded me that healing was slow at my age, yet every pang of pain whispered back, "This is the cost of love." But the physical struggle was not the hardest part. It was the waiting. Lucas's body had to decide whether to accept or reject what I had given him. Each blood test, each doctor's note, felt like a trial by fire. Adam was restless, pacing the halls, peppering the doctors with questions. Olivia spent hours at Lucas's side, humming lullabies even when her voice cracked from exhaustion. As for me, I prayed, sometimes silently, sometimes aloud. Not polished prayers, but raw pleas from a grandmother who had nothing left but faith. One afternoon, Dr. Carter entered my room, his expression careful. Adam and Olivia followed close behind, their faces etched with worry. "There are early signs," the doctor said. "Lucas's counts are beginning to rise. It's too soon to celebrate, but it means his body is showing initial acceptance." Olivia collapsed into Adam's arms, sobbing with relief. My own breath caught in my chest. "Thank God," I whispered, clutching the blanket with trembling fingers. That evening, Adam wheeled me once more into Lucas's room. His cheeks carried the faintest touch of color, a shift so small yet monumental. I leaned close, my voice soft but steady. "Do you hear that, sweetheart? Your body is fighting. You are not alone. Your grandma gave you her strength, and now it's yours to keep." His eyelids fluttered, and though his eyes did not open fully, that small movement felt like a miracle. I pressed my lips to his forehead, tears wetting his skin. Back in my own room, fatigue pressed down heavily, but so did something else, hope. For the first time since Adam's harsh words in my bathroom, I allowed myself to believe that we might make it through this. Not just Lucas, but all of us. That night, I whispered another blessing for you who are listening. If you are waiting for good news, if your days feel heavy with uncertainty, may patience carry you through. May healing arrive in your home, slow but steady, like a dawn that cannot be stopped. The following weeks stretched like a rope pulled taut. Every morning, I braced myself for either relief or despair. But slowly, signs of life began to show in Lucas. His skin grew warmer, his cheeks less hollow. The monitors, once flat with monotony, began to hum with steadier rhythms. The day he first opened his eyes, I was there. Adam pushed my wheelchair into his room, and I saw those familiar brown eyes, Robert's eyes, flutter awake. He was weak, but when his lips curved into the faintest smile, the entire room seemed to breathe again. Olivia broke down, clutching her son's hand, whispering, "You're going to be all right, baby. You're going to be all right." Adam pressed a fist against his mouth, fighting to keep from sobbing aloud. I leaned forward, my own tears falling freely. "Lucas," I whispered, "Grandma is here. I gave you my strength, and now you must keep walking with it." He squeezed my fingers weakly, and in that simple gesture, I felt the universe shift. Over the days that followed, his progress continued. He managed sips of water, then bites of food. Laughter soft, cautious at first, returned to the room. Nurses smiled more easily, and Dr. Carter, though cautious, allowed himself a rare moment of optimism. One evening, Adam sat beside me, his hands folded as if in prayer. His voice was hushed, but firm with emotion. "Mom, you've given me more than I can ever repay. Not just your marrow, not just your sacrifice. You gave me back my son. You gave me back my family. I called you a burden, but you are the anchor that saved us." I reached for his hand. "You don't owe me words, Adam. What matters is that you've seen the truth. Family is not about who drains or who provides. It's about who stands when the storm is strongest." For the first time in years, Adam didn't look like a man buried by responsibility. He looked like my son again. A man humbled, softened, and remade by pain and love. That night, I returned to my room and whispered the final prayer of that chapter. May every grandmother watching know her worth. May your children see your sacrifices before it is too late. May you never again be called a burden, but instead be recognized as the pillars that hold families upright. As I closed my eyes, exhaustion wrapped around me, but so did peace. The storm had not passed completely. There would still be months of treatment, years of rebuilding. But for the first time, we were no longer fractured. We were united. And in that unity, I knew the words that once cut me so deeply had been replaced by something stronger, something lasting, love reborn in the heart of my family. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, Lucas grew stronger. The pale child I had once seen lying motionless beneath hospital lights was now laughing again, chasing toy cars across the living room floor. His cheeks held color, his hair began to grow back, and his laughter filled the silence that had once haunted my home. Adam and Olivia never left my side through my own recovery. They visited me daily, sometimes with the children, sometimes just to sit and share a meal. Our conversations grew long again, filled not with tension, but with stories, laughter, and the kind of honesty that only comes after surviving a storm together. Adam found new work, this time at a smaller firm that demanded less of him but gave him back something more precious, time. Olivia discovered a resilience in herself that surprised even her. And as for me, I discovered that my life still had meaning far greater than I had believed. I no longer dreaded the silence of my house, for it was no longer silent. The children ran through its hallways, filling it with games and giggles. Adam fixed leaky faucets not with resentment, but with eagerness, as though making up for the years he had failed to be present. Olivia cooked with me in the kitchen, learning recipes that Robert used to love. One evening, Adam arrived with a small box in his hands. He set it gently on the table, his expression both nervous and excited. "Mom," he said, sliding it toward me, "this is just a start. A way of saying thank you." Inside, I found 2 plane tickets. Paris. Tears stung my eyes as I looked back at him. "Adam, this is too much." "It's nothing compared to what you've done," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I took from you everything I thought mattered. But you showed me what truly matters. I want to give you the world, even if it's just one trip at a time. I want to spend that time with you, to make memories we should have made long ago." I held the tickets to my chest, overwhelmed not by the destination, but by what they symbolized. My son had called me a burden, but here he was, offering me the world. Holding those tickets in my hands, I felt something shift deep inside me. For so long, I had feared being forgotten, reduced to an inconvenience, dismissed as nothing more than an old woman whose best years were behind her. Yet now, my son looked at me not with impatience, but with reverence. He no longer saw a burden. He saw a lifeline, a mother who had given him everything twice over. The truth is, money can vanish, houses can be lost, and pride can crumble. But love, the kind that binds generations together, cannot be erased by anger, mistakes, or even betrayal. Love is what had carried me through the darkest nights, and love is what had brought my family back to me. Lucas's recovery was a gift none of us would ever take for granted. Each giggle, each step, each hug was a reminder that the sacrifice had been worth it. Adam and Olivia had been humbled, reshaped by their trials, and our bond had grown stronger than it had ever been. One evening, as Adam walked me to the door after another family dinner, He stopped and turned to me. His voice was steady, but tears glistened in his eyes. "Mom," he said, "you're not a burden. You're my anchor, my teacher, and my hero." Those words, so different from the ones that had once shattered me, mended something inside my soul. I realized that my story was not about loss at all. It was about renewal. And so I share this with you, dear listener. If you have ever been told you are a burden, remember this: you are not defined by those words. You are defined by the love you give, the sacrifices you've made, and the lives you've touched. From my heart to yours, I offer this prayer. May your children and grandchildren recognize your worth before it is too late. May your body find rest from its aches, your spirit find peace from its worries, and your home be filled with laughter instead of silence. May your story remind you that you are not a burden. You are a blessing, a foundation, a light that still shines. So, if you are listening right now, I invite you, share, and subscribe to this channel so these lessons can travel to hearts across the world. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from, so that together, we can be more than strangers. We can be a family bound by stories of struggle, sacrifice, and the victory of love.